If you are trying to become a front-end developer, I'm going to talk about 5 misconceptions about becoming one that you need to know. There are rumors and there's advice coming from even very large content creators that I think is screwing a lot of people over. So we're going to go over 5. The very first one might surprise you because this is a very popular thing told, but you hear that you need to learn backend skills to be marketable as a front-end developer. And if your gut told you that doesn't make any sense, your gut's right. The problem is that you get people that spread this information. It really started with coding boot camps, to be honest. But a lot of coding boot camps spit out surface level developers who kind of knew front end, who kind of knew back end, but they were never really good with either. But, in 2021, and even before the pandemic, you were able to get positions kind of with surface level knowledge. It's not that you necessarily knew full stack and that's why you were hired. Most positions wanted to hire people that were good at their area of focus, whether it was front end or back end. But the bar has risen for a lot of junior developers now. And the only thing that's happening is you are now seeing a lot of developers that have went this full stack path, this templated path, who only have surface level knowledge, who aren't even being considered for interviews because their knowledge is just too surface level and their portfolio showcases that, right? If you want to stand out in a front-end position among so many other aspiring developers who think front-end is the easiest to get into, and we'll talk about that in a bit, you need to be good at front-end. You need to dive deeper into front-end. There are so many niches and so many areas that you could dive deeper into front-end, and so many people just suck with CSS or they suck with JS, and they jumped into React too quickly, and they're just trying to build apps, but they don't really flush out any sort of complex features or anything that requires some deep JavaScript knowledge, or anything that requires deep CSS knowledge to build very impressive layouts. They kind of just spit out cookie cutter apps, and they just keep doing that with portfolio project after portfolio project after portfolio project. That doesn't make you stand out. So many other people are doing that. If you want to be good with front end, dive deep into front end, get really good with JS, get really good with CSS, care about semantic HTML, care about accessibility, and yes, care about testing. Yes, there are tests on the front end, and there are companies that are going to require you to write tests on the front end. So yes, eventually you do want to dive into React, of course, but a lot of people just have surface level knowledge on the front end, and then they're not really getting interviews. Then they think they need to learn back end in order to stand out. Everyone's going through the same MERN stack tutorial, and a lot of those tutorials just don't go nearly deep enough. That's why you're not standing out on the front end, because you're not good at front end. Please get good at front end. There's so many years to spend to even get decent at a junior level on the front end. People are just skipping it. So the second one is people are jumping into Next way too quickly. First of all, people are jumping into React way too quickly. I always say this, I highly recommend before you even decide to learn React, go through Eloquent JavaScript. It's a free online book. The first 6 chapters, make sure you understand all the material. You can do the challenges at the back of each chapter, no problems. If you are in that good of a shape, you're probably ready to finally start learning React. A lot of people are not good with JS and they jump into React too quickly, and they're able to just copy and paste what tutorials are telling them to do, but they don't really understand what's happening with React because they don't really understand what's happening with JavaScript that they're writing. The foundations are shaky with a lot of people. And then even in the React docs, I believe they still recommend to use Next if you are learning React. That's not terrible advice for some developers, but I highly disagree with that recommendation for junior or aspiring developers, especially. Just use Vite. One single command will spin up an entire React application with Vite. Go through their tutorial, spin up a React application, and then dive into React. But I think it's important to extract your learning with React outside of Next. Next has a lot of unique things, and a lot of people will. So I think Next is really good for experienced front-end developers that don't really want to get good with backend. I think Next is a really good tool, or to spin up an app very quickly for experienced developers. But it helps to be able to separate what's unique with Next with just building something with React. A lot of people won't do that. And even just like coming up with your own way that you're going to set up React Router and how you're going to organize that, how you're going to organize your files in your own React application says a lot about you as a developer. And you could develop those conventions based off of building a bunch of crappy organized React apps that just grew and grew and grew. And you're like, man, I keep going back into this, but now I'm taking longer and longer to find these components. And like, I don't really have a consistent file structure, and I don't really know like where I want to separate certain components. I haven't really gotten that down. But like these decisions that you eventually develop are really good talking points in an interview. Why did you organize it this way? Why did you decide to separate it by types? Why did you decide to make it a little bit more modular and feature driven, right? Like what about that appealed to you? What went through your mind? Did you encounter any hurdles of, as you were trying to scale your React app, where you're like, man, I could do this a lot better, and you looked at different tutorials and you chose this? Why? What interests you about this? You should be able to talk about these things. You should be able to talk about your organizational patterns. You should be able to talk about your implementation in junior interviews. Yes, you should. You're not just a code monkey. You really have to flesh this stuff out and think through it. Again, the bar has risen, but this was an expectation before for a lot of different people, where you kind of just like built very basic vanilla apps. You tried to scale it, it got disorganized, and then you learned the next abstraction to then make your app a little bit more organized and scalable and reusable. And like React is awesome for that. But when you implement something like Next as a junior or aspiring developer, it comes with its conventions that are very opinionated to Next, which is fine, but a lot of companies do not use Next. Most companies where you are going to be working at a React application do not use Next. And there are some junior developers, I don't know where this is coming from, but there are some junior developers that actually believe Next is just plentiful. Tons of jobs for junior developers in Next if they just learn Next. This is why I think the docs of React recommending Next are a bit misleading to junior developers. I don't think they're trying to distinguish. And if they are recommending it for junior developers, I just strongly disagree. Build something with React. Spin something up with Vite, one single command, then dive deep into React and build some components with it. And then eventually, again, the bar has risen. Before, you didn't really have to get into like any sort of Webpack config, but eventually like spin up or set up your own Webpack config. I mean, like Vite is fine, but Webpack is going to be a little bit more plentiful in a lot of React apps. So set up a basic Webpack config and just build some commands that kind of automate a lot of the bundling and set that up for you. That's going to be helpful. That's going to make you stand out. These are things that junior developers are not doing. That's going to make you stand out. And Next just kind of abstracts all of that away, so you never have to worry about it. But that's not the reality of most React positions. I think it's only going to hurt you to jump into Next too quickly. Now, if you built a bunch of React apps and then you want to try out Next, because I do think it helps to build applications that are full stack applications in the sense where you're saving data. So even if you're not really building a backend, it's a bit of a serverless backend, but like maybe you just link to Firestore, right? It's kind of just a cloud hosted database. You set it up with your React app and you're able to just save data to it. You don't really have to worry about building any routes or anything like that. You're just connecting to a third-party database, and it's really convenient. So you can build more complicated applications by saving and manipulating data in the database. And now you could start building projects that are very useful. But if you don't want to use Firestore, you could eventually learn Next and be able to kind of build a basic backend with it. I think that's fine. I think people especially junior developers, are jumping into it way too early, and that's the problem. Next is a tool, and it's a useful tool. It's very valuable for certain projects, for certain people. Most junior developers are jumping into it way too quickly, and you can definitely get a job without it. And you're probably going to stand out a lot more setting up some of the basic stuff that Next abstracts and organize, like creating your own organizational pattern. Being able to talk about that in the interview will make you stand out among many other junior developers. So, third one. If you are a junior developer, if you have not gotten a professional position, what the fuck are you doing with Tailwind? I have seen so many projects with Tailwind among aspiring developers, and at the second you try to take Tailwind out of the workflow, they fumble completely with CSS. Learning Tailwind does not mean you are going to be good with CSS. I promise you it is only going to push you further away from really reinforcing and learning the fundamentals of CSS. I don't know where this misconception is coming from, but please, junior developers, stop learning Tailwind. Like, Next is explainable eventually, and it can make you marketable for a few extra positions, and it can teach you some conventional organizational patterns that you can decide if you want to pick up, and it can kind of provide a little bit of a backend. There's a reason to eventually learn Next as an aspiring front-end developer, but Tailwind, too many people are bad at CSS that are trying to become front-end developers. Most positions are not going to be hiring for Tailwind. Most positions are going to be hiring for something like SCSS or styled components. That's what they're using. And for some reason, Tailwind just gets pushed on everyone. And you have to realize, just when content creators are obsessed with a tool, and I think that's what's happening, they love it and they push it out, and a lot of experienced developers might pick it up, they might love it, they might hate it. But a lot of these pushes from bigger content creators are more towards just like stuff they love to use in their own stack, but it doesn't necessarily apply to junior developers. And I feel like it's really difficult as a junior developer, and I want to be charitable here, to like navigate all of this information. You're trying to listen to your favorite content creators, and you're trying to learn the things that they recommend because, you know, they trust you, and you kind of assume that they have your best interests at heart in landing a position in the industry, but Tailwind is not the answer. Oh, by the way, if you're trying to become a front-end developer, I highly recommend you check out Scrimba. I'm specifically talking about their front-end developer career path. They have a fun, interactive way to learn how to code and become a web developer. And while that's true, that's not the main reason that I want to promote them, honestly. The main reason is their curriculum is solid. There are a lot of curriculums that do not prepare people to actually be competitive in the market, and I've reviewed a ton of programs, and to this day, it is still one of my favorites and one of the best front-end curriculums out there for self-taught developers. And they're backed by MDN, a leading and well-respected resource in the developer community, and I actually personally run my own mentees through the program to prepare them for front-end developer jobs. And if you choose to sign up via my affiliate link below in the description, you actually get 30% off if you sign up for a paid plan, but you have to sign up by the end of February to take advantage of that because it expires after that. Anyways, check it out for yourself. What do you have to lose? Now let's get back to the topic. I'm telling you, there are way too many people jumping into Tailwind that just suck with CSS. Spend time just building. And I would even argue that you don't need to learn SAS, SCSS. CSS has come a long way with a lot of its new features where using SCSS can, and like, I don't know, building some functions with it can be a little bit of a flex. That it can, you can put it on, you know, you build something with SCSS and you do something a little bit more complicated, create something more reusable with it. You can put that on your resume, and I think that's completely fine, but there's so much you could do with just CSS alone, where if you aren't able to build layouts, if you aren't able to, like, if you have a design mockup and you're not able to take that design and build a layout with just CSS, without Tailwind, you're in trouble. A lot of companies want you to be comfortable with CSS. Please stop using Tailwind as a junior developer. Now, if you have spent a lot of time really building a ton of websites all the way through all of your, your basic vanilla JavaScript applications and eventually your React applications, and eventually you want to try a project with Tailwind to see how you like it. I think that's fine. I think it's okay to explore those tools. The problem is that junior developers are becoming dependent on these abstractions, and it is only hurting them. I think it's okay to build another project with a unique library that you want to use. Just please be careful. The problem always is junior developers just keep jumping into abstractions way too quickly. Their foundations suck horribly. So that's really what I'm trying to get a lot of junior developers to realize. That's the problem, is just jumping into abstractions too quickly because your favorite content creator told you this is the best tool for the job. And they don't really go into context of like what job and what applications actually need a lot of these abstractions, but that's besides the point. All right, so fourth thing, you do not need to be good with design. I don't know where this is coming from either, but I get people that'll come to my streams and ask about this, and it's like they ask, or no, the reason why they don't like front end or they're not pursuing front end is because they're like, I'm not good at web design. What the fuck does that have to do with anything? Have you seen some of the stuff that I built? I build stuff that looks like a 5-year-old could have drew it better. I suck with design. I suck so hard with design. You don't need to be a web designer to be a front-end developer. There are going to be niche positions where kind of blends design and front-end development together. Usually that is more focused on like really small startups where you're wearing a lot of different hats. But those positions are a lot fewer. When you apply for front-end positions, the expectation usually is going to be that you are going to get a high fidelity mockup, at least like kind of a semi-low fidelity mockup at the very least, but usually a high fidelity mockup. So you basically get the website, what it looks like, mobile, potentially tablet version, and desktop version. And then you translate that into code and you build a website based off of that design. That's your typical front-end developer position. So I don't know where that's coming from. You don't need to be good with web design, but I do think you should care about kind of just UX fundamentals. I think like having just a basic understanding of stuff like, being consistent with your spacing. If you have like if you have a banner with some text and maybe an input and an email sign up or whatever, if you have like 50 pixels padding on the very top and you have like 10 pixels on the bottom and it looks really scrunched on the bottom and it just looks like crap, I feel like I feel like neglecting that and not having consistent spacing, or that there are other UX fundamentals like proximity that you could focus on. There are lists online that you could look up for like UX web fundamentals for like front-end developers, where you can kind of just take a website and make it look decent and readable and legible. And I don't think that takes much effort, and I don't think that's about becoming a better designer. It's just about like very basic positioning of things and sizing of things. I think you could probably spend a day just picking up some UX fundamentals and then start applying them into your projects. No problem. And it'll take a little bit of practice to kind of develop I wouldn't even call it like a designer eye, but just like a gut feeling of like, you know what? I think I should like create a little bit more spacing here. Let me try it. Yes, that looks better. Like that's the extent of you building out a lot of your layouts as a front-end developer. You're not expected to be really good at front-end design or at web design in general. So basic US fundamentals, but definitely not web design. Not a good designer. I promise you will survive as a front-end developer. And really where a lot of developers struggle getting positions as front-end, the reason is because their foundations suck. They suck with JS and they suck with CSS. That's mainly what I see. All right, the fifth misconception, that front end is the easiest to get into as a software engineer. This has been spread by so many people, a lot of junior developers who are continuing to spread that information when they've never even landed a position in the industry, but they were told that, and so they repeat it, they parrot it. Front-end developer positions are very competitive. The number of junior developers who are going through the MERN stack tutorials and just kind of building surface level applications and applying to front-end positions is crazy. There are a lot of aspiring front-end developers that are applying for front-end positions who are not quite at the level they need to be. But companies have to figure out arbitrary ways to trim a lot of resumes and applications because so many people are applying to front-end positions. It's highly, highly competitive at the entry level, where you're getting like potentially 500 people applying for the same front-end position. Not all positions, but a lot of positions. You'd be surprised. But there are a lot of, majority of those developers are just surface level developers that kind of learned a basic MERN stack tutorial, and that was it. That was it. And they just built applications with it. They didn't really build a solid foundation. So if you are that aspiring front-end developer that really builds a solid foundation, it goes deep into the front end, you are going to stand out a lot more than you think you are. There are a lot of different variables that are going to affect you getting a position. So just being a good developer isn't everything. Also, it's your soft skills, networking, it's how you present yourself, potentially building self-branding. It's like what companies you're applying to. Like there are a lot of different things that you have to do right, and that is the struggle of landing a job in the industry finally. But I can tell you for certain, most people that are applying for front-end positions are just surface-level developers who get weeded out because they don't have a portfolio. There's like no activity on GitHub, nothing to showcase of like what they can do, what their experience is. It's people that'll fail FizzBuzz tests. It's people that just like really suck with JavaScript, really suck with CSS. And if you are diving deep into the front end as a junior developer, you're going to stand out quite a bit. But I don't think that means it's the easiest position to get into. And you get a lot of people that don't like front end that much, that are just like, you know what, I'm going to break into the industry. I hear front end is the easiest. Once I get in, then I'll transfer it. Most of those people never become a front end developer. They eventually give up. Most people that would rather do back end, do front end, and eventually give up because of what I'm telling you, because it requires depth. And most people aren't willing to get that depth of knowledge on the front end. And so they give up. 2-3 years in, they're just like, oh, no company's hiring. And they have a ton of spread out knowledge. They haven't really, again, we can go into in a different video of like a lot of other red flags for junior developers, but like a lot of people are just trying a bunch of different stuff, hoping like something will stick. And they don't really go into depth and narrow down and become good at that type of position that they're actually applying to. So if you like backend, what I'm saying is like do backend. Dive into backend. A lot of people struggle to get that initial backend position because their backend skills are surface level. There aren't a lot of good courses for backend. There just aren't. So shameless shout out. I am affiliated with boot.dev. You can get a discount in the video description below, and you could definitely try it out for yourself. But for real, like I recommend them because I've been searching for a very, very long time for a self-taught developer course that actually prepares backend developers. And that's been the problem because a lot of people that do like backend, they'll learn these full stack Node courses and tutorials and stuff like on Udemy and different places like that, where it's just teaching you a lot of surface level stuff. It doesn't have a lot of depth. Front end is not the easiest to get into. Please don't be fooled by that. what I find is the easiest to get into is the path that you actually enjoy enough to spend years building yourself up as a developer going down that path. And if you are not willing to do that, you're going to have a really, really rough time. So if you like front end, it's actually, and you're willing to spend years at it, it's actually a lot easier to be competitive among many other people who take a ton of breaks and don't really deepen their knowledge and reinforce their skills. You can stand out, but if you don't like front end, do not expect to just get into the industry because front end is the easiest to get into when everyone and their mother wants to apply to it. Pursue something that you might like instead. That's it. Those are 5 misconceptions for front-end developers. Of course, there are a ton more. If you want me to extend this video and talk about more misconceptions, I was a professional front-end developer for a little less than a few years, and I've been mentoring a lot of front-end developers for the past 5 years or 7 years or something like that. So I know front-end pretty well, but I can create more videos like this. Just let me know. But yeah, let me know what you think is kind of holding you back in the comments. And you know what I would love to see in the comments, to be honest with you? Instead of like people just blaming the industry, I would like to hear like what you personally are fucking up. Everyone is fucking up. I made so many mistakes trying to land a front-end position. Everyone is fucking up as an aspiring developer. What are you fucking up? Let me know in the comments.